Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Zachary Croteau in Boston, Massachusetts. Zach is a sales development representative at Unitrends, a company specializing in business continuity. Previously, he was an employment branding specialist at career website careerrealism.com, and he holds a Bachelor of Arts in Communication from the University of New Hampshire. Zach, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to connect. I think it's been a while since we spoke. I think, one thing when I talk about your background that's not immediately apparent is that you just finished your undergraduate degree. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be finished up with school.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the reason that I invited you on today is because I think there's a number of lessons that job seekers can take away from your job search that will really help them. So I think the very first lesson comes from the way that I met you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in 2000...
No, I was going to say, I reached right out to you.
Yeah, in 2014, like you were still in school, and I think you sent me a note on LinkedIn. Is that right?
Yeah, I think... I'm pretty sure, honestly, I came across your profile when I was looking at, I think, Pepperdine Notables.
Yeah, you did. And you were asking me some questions about Pepperdine. You reached out and said, hey, would you be willing to talk to me? And, of course, I was happy to talk to you because, you were still in school. You brought up Pepperdine. It was like multiple things that were perfect. So for our listeners, how often are you kind of going out and reaching out to people that you don't know?
So, I don't really have a schedule that I do it on. It's more or less when, if I'm just kind of like searching LinkedIn, I come across someone that, piques my interest in the industry that I'm looking into, or, where you were at Pepperdine, that's a school that I'm looking at, just something that I have a genuine interest in. I'm always just kind of just open to, shooting a network invitation or connection invitation, and just, seeing what they, what they do and getting to know them. So, on a weekly basis, maybe anywhere from, 4 to 5 different connections I'll try to make. Some weeks I don't have any because, I'll be busier than other weeks. But, I'm always just trying to open up my network and just meet, new exciting people.
Oh, that's really great. So when did you start doing this? Like, how long have you been doing this for?
I would say probably my junior year of college is when I really kind of, made it a hobby of mine, when I started, getting really comfortable with LinkedIn and, building my resume. And, I'd say junior year of college is when I started reaching out the most.
So what gave you the idea to start back when you were a junior in college?
So, ever since I was in high school, I always wanted to move out to LA and get into the artist management industry, for hip-hop artists. And I was actually talking to alumni of my fraternity because I was working with them on some career development stuff, and they gave me the idea to, reach out to the alumni of the fraternity. Mm-hmm. And they kind of helped me move forward with that by, setting me up with informational interviews with certain people. And then from there, where I kind of just got comfortable with, the tone and the, the language that you have to set when you're meeting new people, I just went out on my own, and I just started doing it without the help of my fraternity, to not only fraternity members, but also just anybody that's just in the industries that I'm looking into working in.
So if you were to email 10 people, how many do you think would respond typically?
It depends on, I feel like it depends on the day, but I could get anywhere from, 0 replies from all of them, or, up to 3 replies. It's not an exact science with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's more or less, if you're catching them at the right time, and then if they're just too busy in general. But I don't have a high expectancy for how many people actually reply to me.
Okay.
But it's more or less just getting it out there. The more people you try to reach out to, the more likely you're going to get a response.
Yeah, absolutely. So how often, does anybody ever write back and say, you're really bugging me, I can't take these emails, don't contact me? Does that ever happen?
I haven't gotten that. Yeah, I've never gotten like "you're bugging me" email, because I mean I try to be respectful of how many I send. More or less, I'll connect with them on LinkedIn first, see what if they have interest in talking to me, and then I'll send them a LinkedIn message and just say, hey, if you have 5 minutes to talk, I'd love to pick your brain to learn about the industry. And if they don't reply to that, I'll probably send them like one follow-up, maybe 3 weeks later, and say, I know you're extremely busy. I just wanted to try you one more time. Maybe I call you at a bad time before. And then, if they don't reply to that, then I just cut ties and, I try to meet with new people.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think this is really fascinating because so often when we're looking for a job, we find a job through someone that we know. And if we're not reaching out to new people, I mean, it's really hard to expand our network.
Right.
Well, so something I think that's pretty interesting when I go through your LinkedIn profile is not only are you, reaching out to people, but you have a lot of written recommendations or written endorsements, I should say, about your work, like coming from people that you worked with. And I noticed that at Career Realism, you wrote on a topic that was Monday morning networking using LinkedIn endorsements. Can you talk a little bit about how you've gone about getting those endorsements and how they've helped you?
Yeah, so I mean, for the recommendations and the endorsements, obviously there are two different things. Endorsements, I would on any given Monday or just any given day, really, I'll kind of just endorse some of the people I know on LinkedIn. I'll try to get bump up their skills, because then more than likely they're gonna get back to you and endorse you for something. Mm-hmm. Same thing goes with the recommendations. The recommendations, that's a little bit more serious to me, because you're seriously recommending someone for something that they've done. And all the people that I've recommended, I do very specific examples of how they've succeeded in what they're doing, and then more often than not, they'll send me a recommendation right back. They'll write something really great about me as well. So it's kind of one of those give and take motions. I'll usually am the one that will initiate that, because I think that's actually a feature that a lot of people overlook. Mm-hmm. But it's very important. I think it's very important to have on your LinkedIn profile. So, I'll go down to people that I worked with professionally, people that I worked with in my fraternity. I'll send them recommendations, very specific recommendations, and then, like I said, more often than not, they'll send something back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's not only good to kind of have them, but I really believe that employers truly do look at your LinkedIn profile, and that having those sort of written recommendations make a big difference in terms of their perception of you.
Right. I believe so as well.
Yeah. So another thing that is really interesting about your LinkedIn profile is that you had at least one internship during college. How many internships total did you do during college?
So I actually did 2 internships during college. The first one was with Career Realism. That one I did in the summer of 2014.
Okay.
And it turned into a job during that school year. And then this past summer I worked for Medicus Healthcare Solutions doing physician recruiting.
Okay. So the one that turned into a full-time job, Career Realism, how did that happen? Like most internships, they're for the summer, they end, you go back to school, and that's kind of it.
Right.
What was different?
Yeah, so really and truly, one thing that I believe set me apart from, many other interns out there is the fact that every time I had an internship, I treated it like a full-time job. I never slacked in any form at all. I never took a day off with my internships. And I just came in and worked as hard as I could every single day, and I engaged with what we were doing. Mm-hmm. So at the end of summer 2014, my boss, JT O'Donnell, really recognized that, and she's actually the one that asked me to stay on. I didn't even bring up the topic of that. She asked me to stay on and work throughout the school year.
Oh, wow. So did you have to go into the office to work, or were you able to work kind of remotely?
A little bit of both. So I worked in the office 2 days a week. Sometimes 3. I would work a full day on Fridays. But then, if we had snowstorms, or if I wanted to help out with something on my own time, I could just log in from home and help out with that remotely. I mean, I was only 30 minutes away from the office, so So it wasn't too hard to commute in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes sense. Well, so you currently, like I mentioned in the introduction, you currently work as a sales development rep at Unitrends. And, I've talked with a lot of recent graduates that really, really struggle to sort of land an opportunity after they finish college. At least it takes some time. How were you able to land this opportunity? What was it like for you?
So with this opportunity, I was actually lucky enough that my brother works for this company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, I was interviewing. I actually had another offer as well at a different company, but my brother, he mentioned to me, he's like, you want to come work for my company? Let me get you in touch with the recruiter. And I'm like, all right. So I held off on accepting the other offer, and I got in touch with the recruiter, had my informational interview, or my beginning interview with him right after I left the other office, after I got the offer. And the recruiter, he really liked me. He gave me a call the next day and offered me a job the very next day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, it was a very, very fast-paced process right there. I think my brother helped push it along, but that's just, it's just another example of, utilizing your network. Yeah, it's my brother, but at the same time, it's a professional network. They didn't hire me just because my brother worked here. They hired me because, a recommendation, and, I did well in the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so, if we're listening today and maybe we've recently graduated from college and we're really struggling to find a job, what advice do you have for someone else in that situation who's really struggling? What should they be doing?
I think that they really need to, reach out to your peers. That's one of the most important parts, because the other job that I was looking into for the offer, it wasn't something that I really just actively searched for. Mm-hmm. It was, honestly, I was browsing Facebook one day, and this girl that I had a connection with on Facebook, she mentioned that her company was hiring. So I shot her a message, and I'm like, hey, what are they hiring for? When are they looking to hire? And it happened to line up perfectly with when I was trying to go into the workforce. So I think just being aware of what's going on around you, and just utilizing every network you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you mentioned before we started recording that you've been helping some of your friends find jobs, and I'm curious, what kinds of things, what types of activities are you doing to help them to find a job?
So, one of them is, utilize, not even just helping them, find something, but more or less utilizing my network for them. Mm-hmm. So one of my good friends, Keegan Riley, he worked on a project with me in my fraternity where we raise money for cancer. Mm-hmm. So I knew his work ethic. I knew he's a grinder. He loves to work. He wants to make money. So I had a connection with one of the VP of sales at a company down here in Burlington, and he asked me. He said, do you know anyone that is a UNH alumni or a UNH graduating student that wants to work in sales? I have an opening, and I want a UNH alumni because he wants to give it back to UNH, because the VP of sales actually went to UNH as well. Mm-hmm. So I immediately thought of my friend Keegan, and I linked them up, and they hit it off, and now he got offered the job. So as far as, like I said, as far as tools, I've said it multiple times throughout this interview. I just can't stress more hard that using your network is the best way to go about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about building your network through LinkedIn, but what other things are you doing to kind of build your network? Are there events that you're going to? Are there things that you're doing offline?
Yeah, so I don't typically go out to networking events per se. Mm-hmm. Not that I have anything against networking events, but I think it's kind of like one of those forced situations where, it's kind of awkward, and, you're forced to engage with people, and, most people aren't necessarily that interested. Mm-hmm. I think more of the organic growth of a relationship is a much better way to go about things. Mm-hmm. Striking up conversations in bars, striking up conversations in restaurants, and, finding out, oh, what do you do? What do you do in just that, just organic growth. It feels more comfortable to me. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one of the things that I do offline. Other than that, recently I went back to UNH for a sales competition. I decided to judge this
Okay.
year. I competed in the past, so I wanted to give back and judge this year, and that competition is just filled with VPs of sales from all over the place. Oracle, Dine, like just some big companies. EMC was there as well. So, I utilized that as a networking opportunity as well, while I was also giving back to UNH.
Oh, that's awesome. So do you bring business cards when you do these things?
I do, yes.
Okay. And do you try to get business cards?
Yeah. That's one of the main things that someone, I think it was one of my brothers in my fraternity, one of the alumni mentioned to me, he said, collect business cards.
Yeah.
When you go out, don't be afraid to ask for someone's business card, because that's the main way you're going to stay in touch with them. And ever since then, everybody I talk to, I always ask for the business card.
Yeah. Does it ever make you kind of uncomfortable, or do you feel, how do you feel about it?
No, I think it's just another way of, just asking if you can stay in touch. If you like start the conversation with just saying, oh, do you mind if I email you sometime, and we catch up after this, maybe grab a cup of coffee and so I can pick your brain. Oh, what's your business card? Something like that. You need to have like a nice little comfortable way of saying it, but it's not really that uncomfortable. It may be like once or twice, the first couple times it was, but after that it just becomes kind of just second nature.
Yeah, totally. So when you do get a chance to sit down and pick their brain over some coffee, what are some of the questions that you ask them? Like, what types of informational interview questions do you ask?
Yeah, so I always kind of start with, how did you land into the company you're in today? Or how did you get into this industry out of college? That's one of the main things that I look at, because, where I'm fresh out of college, I need to know the right steps to take to move forward with my career. So it's always good to start with, what did they do when they first got out of college? That's one of the main things I found that was very helpful. Aside from that, what helped you grow through the ranks from being entry level to where you're at today? A lot of the people that I've met with are VPs, so it's obviously a very long process that they've gone through, but what steps did you take to get from A to B and B to C, and so on and so forth.
Do you write your questions down, or do you kind of do it on the fly?
I write some of my questions down, but any interview that I've gone through doesn't really go as planned. It always just kind of turns into a conversation. So I think it's good to have like maybe 2 or 3 main questions that you want to have answered, and then everything else you kind of just do on the fly.
And in terms of like the timing, like how much time do you expect someone to devote to you when they meet with you? Like, especially if it's like the first time that you've met them.
I expect no more than 5 minutes.
Oh, really?
That's what I expect. But I've never had an informational interview that's lasted shorter than like 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I've always kept them engaged, and they've kept me engaged. One example I can think of is I actually went down to New York, and I met with the VP of marketing for Fox. And I went down there. I figured that she could meet with me for like 10 minutes, and that's it. I ended up staying in her office for about an hour. She pushed back a meeting and to continue talking to me.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a really cool opportunity to speak with her, and I still talk to her to this day.
So for someone like that, how do you stay in touch? Like, what do you do to stay in touch with someone?
I just send them little friendly like reconnection emails. Hey Jen, we haven't spoken X amount of time. I just wanted to see how you're doing. Do you have any new projects coming up that you're working on that that are interesting? Just kind of engage in what they're doing. Let them know what you're doing as well. And then see if you want to grab a cup of coffee again soon, and just catch up, something like that.
Yeah.
Keep it very casual. I spoke to her actually recently, because I went down to New York for a weekend, and I wanted to meet up and grab a cup of coffee. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to, because she was in D.C. for the weekend, but I spoke to her after. I'm like, yeah, hopefully we can catch up again. In the meantime, I'd be more than happy to hear about any job opportunities you have coming up. And she's like, yeah, I will 100% think of you going forward.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. So when you have like the first initial conversation and say you ended up in her office for an hour, at the end, how does it end? Like, I'm assuming that you're not asking for anything, like you don't have an expectation would be my assumption. So how do you kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, so, yeah, you're right. You don't really kind of have an expectation because, if you have an expectation, you're very keen to be getting let down at the end of it because informational interviews don't always lead to jobs. Probably 9 times out of 10, they don't lead to jobs right at that moment. But, I'll kind of I'll end informational interviews with, hey, do you mind if I give you my resume? If something pops up in the future, I'd love to be considered for it. And if we could just stay in touch, can I have your business card or something like that?
I think that's a great option. And you talked a little bit about, keeping your expectations kind of low. One thing I've noticed with some job seekers is that, say they have a company that they're really interested in. It could be like FedEx or something. And they look on the website for the company and they see that there are no jobs posted that they're interested in. And so they decide this is probably not someone to have an informational interview with because obviously there are no jobs. What would you say to someone that kind of feels that way?
I would say don't be foolish. Get any interview you can get because getting in front of their face and talking to them, even just reaching out for an informational interview, shows that you're different than every other job seeker out there.
Right, absolutely. And, you want to build that relationship with them in advance of the job becoming available. I think very often jobs are posted after they've already got someone in mind for a particular role. So I wouldn't wait, and I think you're totally right about that. So you mentioned that this is kind of a process that you learned through your fraternity. Did you kind of hear about it from anyone else? And you also mentioned that you are a little different than other job seekers. Are you finding that other people are maybe not doing what you're doing as often?
Yeah, the more I've kind of talked with my peers, the more I realize that people just don't utilize networking to its fullest potential. More so people will, check job boards and, that type of job seeking, where I'm more interested in making the relationships than necessarily getting a job. Because I'll network with someone that I have zero interest in the company or a job that they have to offer. So, yeah, I don't know. Did that answer the question correctly?
Yeah. So when you network with someone that you're not really interested in their company, what is the purpose behind networking with that person?
Well, because not only, maybe you're not interested in that company, but, maybe they have a connection that they'd be happy to introduce you to. So it's, kind of one of those things that, yeah, maybe we're not the best fit for you, but, I think that Mike over at XYZ would really love to have you in, something like that.
Yep, absolutely. So of all of the different jobs that you've had so far, have you found any of them through a job board or have they all been through networking connections?
I've never actively searched for a job on a job board.
See, that's great. That's great. I meet people all the time who've applied to 200 jobs online and are really struggling, to land one. But then when you start putting that energy into networking, it's like it completely changes the entire game and the way that it's, the way that it works.
You look much more appealing into the eyes of the recruiters because it shows that you have interpersonal skills and you're not afraid to, make that extra step to meet people and, just make the extra step in general to have more effort in what you're doing. Absolutely. Well, so another thing interesting, I saw an article that you wrote where you talked about how important it is to have side projects. And I noticed, on your LinkedIn that you've had a lot of side projects. And so it was maybe a few too many to sort of name right in the introduction. But I'm curious, of your side projects, what are the ones that you feel really proud about? And, how do you decide which ones to actually get involved with? Yeah, so I'll start with, which ones to get involved with. I think that, a side project, it needs to be something that you're completely passionate about. Otherwise, it's really no point in taking it on because you won't put all your effort into it. because as a side project, it's already hard enough to put effort into it because, you work 50 hours a week and then you go and do this on the side. So it has to be something that you're extremely passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can also benefit from as well.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to do anything, necessarily that's not going to benefit you, but also that you're not passionate about either.
Right, absolutely.
So probably my most proud side project that I worked on was, so for my fraternity, I was the chief philanthropic officer.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, we run a cancer, philanthropy for cancer. And it's called the Taylor Trudeau Cycle for Life. And for that, I took that on. Honestly, when I was a junior, I had zero interest in doing it because I'm just like, wow, it's a lot of work. A lot goes into it, and a lot is riding on you to get great because it's the biggest philanthropy of the year for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the senior year, my friend Keegan Riley, the co-chairman of the philanthropy with me, I kind of did it in honor of him because he was a child cancer survivor.
Oh, wow.
So, so I did it with him. I told him I'd do it with him, and, I really took that on and, made it like my main project. I may have pushed my schoolwork away a little bit to do the project, but no, it was really cool because, we raised $15,000 for cancer. The brother that we named the actual philanthropy after is someone who passed away in 2008 of leukemia.
Oh, wow.
So that's how it started. And so we raised $15,000 for that, which ended up being about a 25% increase from the year before. So, I was extremely passionate about that project. But as I mentioned, it also benefits me in a way because it shows my work ethic. A 25% increase in donations is a big jump for something like that as well.
Mm-hmm. So have you talked about this project in interviews?
Oh, in every interview I go into, I talk about it.
That's great. Okay. Yeah, I think sometimes we talk about only the things that we've been paid to do, and sometimes we don't always talk about the things where we've donated our time. And it sounds like you got a lot out of it. Not only did you talk about how important it was, but you just quantified the benefit in terms of the growth in donations. And I think whether it's your professional job or whether it's a volunteer opportunity, quantifying success in terms of numbers is also really, really important part of the process.
Right.
So are there any other side projects that you've been working on? Are you still keeping up with these things now that you're full-time working?
Yeah, so, one of the other projects I worked on in college, it's kind of been on the back burner recently because I've just been extremely busy, but so I took a class on social entrepreneurship, so social innovation, I should say. So something that, take Tesla, they're a company, but they're also green initiative. So something that is like benefiting the bad in the world, essentially. So I came up with a nonprofit idea for that class. I wanted to create a nonprofit that is enriching the lives of urban youth to decrease gang population and also to just give kids within the inner city the opportunities that people from the suburbs have and people from the top 1% of America have. So I started working on that in college. I did it for a competition as well, and it's something that I am very interested in pursuing. It's just, as of right now, it's hard to really put all the effort into it when I'm, as busy as I am recently.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you said one other thing I thought was kind of interesting that just was kind of thrown in there, which was that sometimes when you worked on these projects, your schoolwork may have taken a back seat for a few minutes. And I will just mention, when I was an undergrad, I was not a bad student. I was a very diligent student, but I was definitely not the straight A student that some of my peers were. And I think when I was going through the program, I would have assumed that those peers who got the straight A's would be the ones with the best jobs and the best opportunities. And at the end of it, it actually ended up being me. And it was because I had been networking and I had been doing internships. And so my guess is that even if your schoolwork slacked at times, I bet you found that there was so much added value through these other things that you're doing. They've probably helped you even more in the real world than maybe that schoolwork would have.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. One kind of quote that I live by that I just came up is, my schoolwork doesn't quantify my work ethic. My work ethic is not represented by my grades in school, because yes, I worked hard in school, but I always did stuff that was, to me, made more life experience sense to work on than, putting all my effort into writing papers.
I totally agree completely. So I also saw when I looked online, I think you even have this on your LinkedIn profile, that you did a video at Career Realism that talked about your strengths, and I think it's called 7 Reasons This Intern is a Future Talent Agent. And I think it was like your entire team was explaining all the things that were really great about you during the internship and what made you really great. So first of all, how amazing is that? What a big endorsement. I'm curious, how did this video come about? And from your perspective, what do you think is your biggest strength?
Okay. So one, that video and article I was extremely grateful for. It came about because I was looking for internships at talent agencies in Los Angeles and talent management companies in Los Angeles, New York, and I wasn't having any luck. It's a very, very difficult industry to break into, and I was just having a hard time getting in there because there's nowhere to really find the jobs. Like, there's no job boards or anything like that. It's something that you need to be referred into, just about. So my boss at the time, JT O'Donnell, she, just came up to me one day and just took a picture of me and then walked away. And I'm like, oh, what was that all about? And so I shot down to her desk. I'm like, hey, why'd you take a picture of me? She's like, you'll find out tomorrow. I'm like,
oh, wow.
I'm like, okay, all right. So, so she just wrote the article and made the video. I introed into that video, and it was like what I loved about working at Career Realism, and then the rest went into what my team loved about me. So I had no idea it was even happening until I read the article, which was really cool. And as far as what my biggest strength is, I would say the fact that I'm very resilient, and I'm always just grinding it out. I'm always trying to, work to my fullest potential every single day, and I don't ever let up. I think a lot of people become complacent once they get comfortable somewhere, and I just refuse to ever become complacent.
Absolutely. And the thing that's so interesting about that is that it's not necessarily a skill that you probably learn in school. It's not one that you have to pay for or take training for. And it's something that you can simply just work hard and show up every day, like you said, like not miss work and really care about what you're doing. And that sometimes makes all the difference. And you can rise above people who may be more qualified or have more experience or whatever it is. You can sometimes surpass them just using that strength alone.
Right.
So that's terrific. So for our listeners who would like to learn more about you, maybe want to check out your LinkedIn profile or something, where should they go?
So if they want to check out my LinkedIn profile, it's just my full name. So it's Zachary Croteau. And so it's Croteau. And, Facebook, Zach Croteau, and Instagram is Zactoe, Zactoe. So that's, those are my handles. I'd be more than happy to connect with, anybody out there that is looking to, grow their career and, just have a conversation.
Great. Well, I will put links to all of that in the show notes for today's episode. Well, Zach, thank you so much for joining me. This has been so helpful. I know there's going to be a lot of people that I refer to listen to this episode because they're struggling in this area. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me out here.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher to make sure you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.